During this session, learners will analyze the numerous frameworks, philosophies, and theories to determine how to integrate technology into instruction. They will interpret the pedagogical approaches for teaching in a standards-based curriculum during the digital age by conducting academic discourse and research and discussing their findings during an online collaborative forum. Um, During this session, learners will also compare the dichotomy between the learning preferences of the digital generation and the teaching practices involved with traditional learning models by conducting academic discourse and research in an online collaborative forum. And finally, learners will analyze digital bombardment and examine the statistical evidence of its existence. Using digital tools during the learning process can drastically improve outcomes. However, it is crucial for both learners and educators to use technology in a productive manner. The following philosophies, frameworks, and theories will help guide educators and trainers to use digital tools for higher order learning with their learners. TPACK is a model for educators as they begin to use digital tools and strategies to support teaching, learning, and assessment. Developed by educational researchers Mishra and Kohler, TPACK is designed around the idea that content, what you teach, and pedagogy, how you teach, must be the basis for any technology that you plan to use in your classroom to enhance learning. There is content knowledge, CK, teachers' knowledge about the subject matter to be learned or taught. There's pedagogical knowledge, teachers' deep knowledge about the processes and practices or methods of teaching and learning. And then there's technology knowledge, knowledge about certain ways of thinking about and working with technology tools and resources. At the center of the TPACK framework is the complex intersection of these three primary forms of knowledge. The TPACK framework emphasizes the kinds of knowledge that lie at the intersections between three primary forms: pedagogical content knowledge, or PCK, technological content knowledge, TCK, technological pedagogical knowledge, TPK, and technological pedagogical content knowledge, TPACK. Pedagogical content knowledge is central to the conceptualization of PCK, is the idea of the transformation of the subject matter for teaching, which occurs when the teacher interprets the subject matter, finds numerous ways to represent it, and adapts the instructional materials to alternative conceptions and students' prior knowledge. Technological content knowledge, TCK, represents how technology and content influences and constrain one another. Educators need to master more than the subject matter they teach. They must also have a deep understanding of how subject matter can be changed by the application of particular technologies during instruction. Technological pedagogical knowledge, an understanding of how teaching and learning can change when particular technologies are used in particular ways. TPACK is the intersection of all these different knowledge bases. It is the basis of effective teaching with technology, requiring an understanding of using technologies, pedagogical strategies that use the technologies in a constructive way to teach content, knowledge of what makes concepts difficult or easy to learn, and how technology can help redress some of the problems that students face. The main takeaway from this framework is all three knowledge types must be considered when using digital tools and resources with learners. The SAMR model for integrating technology into teaching, developed by Dr. Puentedura. SAMR is an acronym that stands for Substitution, Augmentation, Modification, and Redefinition. The SAMR model provides a technique for moving through degrees of technology adoption to find more meaningful uses of technology in teaching and move away from simply using technology for technology's sake. The SAMR model consists of 4 steps: substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. The substitution and augmentation levels are considered enhancement steps, while modification and redefinition are termed transformation steps. Substitution. At this stage, technology is directly substituted for a more traditional one. It is a simple, bare bones, direct replacement. For example, if you are teaching a government lesson on the Constitution, you might use an electronic or web-based version of the document instead of a hard copy. For augmentation, the technology is again directly substituted for a traditional one, but with significant enhancements to the student experience. In other words, you ask yourself if the technology increases or augments a student's productivity and potential in some way. Next is modification. In this stage, you are beginning to move from enhancement to transformation on the model. Instead of replacement or enhancement, this is an actual change to the design of the lesson and its learning outcome. The key question here, does the technology significantly alter the task? Finally is redefinition, the last stage of the SAMR model. It represents the pinnacle of how technology can transform a student's experience. In this case, you ask yourself if the technology tools allow educators to redefine a traditional task in a way that would not be possible without the technology, creating a novel experience. SAMR is a spectrum. Substitution can be your best option for a particular setting. But if entire instructional approach consists of digitizing your resources without enhancing them, that textbook to e-book transition, then it may be time to evaluate why you're using technology in the first place. Layering technology into antiquated tasks isn't going to improve the learning experience, but purposefully altering the substitute or the substance of these tasks to address the skills students need today and those that they'll need tomorrow will improve learning. Webb's depth of knowledge schema has become a tool educators can use to analyze the cognitive demand intended by learning and assessment tasks. Webb developed a process for systematically analyzing the alignment between learning standards and test items in assessments. The model categorizes learning and assessment tasks by different levels or depth of knowledge to successfully complete the task. Hess later added content-specific descriptors to the model to use with teachers, organizations, or institutions conducting alignment practices. Level 1 is recall and reproduction. Curricular elements that fall into this category involve basic tasks that require students to recall or reproduce knowledge and/or skills. The subject matter content at this level usually involves working with facts, terms, details, calculations, principles, etc. An example of this would be like a fill-in-the-blank, define vocabulary, solve a math problem using an equation. Level 2 is skills and concept, which includes the engagement of mental processing beyond recalling or locating an answer. A Level 2 describe or explain task requires students to go beyond a basic description or definition to predict a possible result or explain why something might happen. The learner makes use of information provided in context to determine intended word meanings, which tools or approaches to use, and to find a solution. An example of this type of mental process includes summarizing, estimating, etc. Level 3 is strategic thinking and reasoning. Tasks and classroom activities falling into this category demand the use of planning, reasoning, and higher order thinking processes, such as analysis and evaluation, to solve real-world problems or explore questions with multiple possible outcomes. Divergent learning. Level 4 is extended thinking, demands extensive integrated use of higher order thinking processes such as critical, divergent, and creative productive thinking, reflection, and modifications over an extended period of time. Learners are engaged in conducting multifaceted investigations to solve real-world problems with unpredictable solutions. An example of this would be like a short film, a multi-step report, a video game, or even an anthology. Roblier states the TIP model, or the Technology Integration Plan, is aimed at assisting teachers with selecting the best resources and strategies when implementing digital technology into the classroom to suit specific classroom needs. It is a 5-phased plan designed to help teachers plan for, implement, and assess their use of technology in instruction. Phase 1. In determining the relative advantage of a specific technology, teachers need to consider the learning problem and think about whether the benefits offered by teaching with technology, in comparison with another method, are worth the effort and cost. Phase 2 is teachers set clear expectations about learning outcomes and how they will be assessed. Learning outcomes should be specific, observable, and measurable. When adapting to new methods, teachers may find that objectives they've had in the past need to be modified to accommodate the use of technology. Phase 3, based on the specific learning needs, teachers can design technology-supported teaching strategies that are directed or inquiry-based. They can be single subject or interdisciplinary. They can be individual or collaborative. Phase 4, teachers will need to coordinate the many aspects of the digital and non-digital instructional environment necessary to carry out the planned instructional strategies. Phase 5, teachers can use the assessments they have developed to evaluate student learning along with feedback from students to determine what should be changed to ensure that even more success occurs in future implementation. The framework for 21st century learning. This framework describes the skills, knowledge, and expertise students must master to succeed in work and life. It is a blend of content knowledge, specific skills, expertise, and literacies. Every 21st century skill implementation requires the development of core academic subject knowledge and understanding among all students. Those who can think critically and communicate effectively must build on a base of core academic subject knowledge. The elements described in this section as 21st century student outcomes are the knowledge, skills, and expertise students must master to succeed in work and life in the 21st century. Core subjects and 21st century themes. Mastery of core subjects and 21st century themes is essential for all students. For example, world languages, arts, mathematics, economics, content areas. Next is learning and innovation skills. Increasingly are being recognized as those that separate students who are prepared for a more and more complex life and work environments in the 21st century, and those who are not. A focus on creativity, critical thinking, communication, and collaboration is essential to prepare students for their futures. Life and career skills. Today's life and work environments require far more than thinking skills and content knowledge. The ability to navigate the complex life and work environments in the globally competitive information age requires students to pay rigorous attention to developing adequate life and career skills. Information, media, and technology skills. People in the 21st century live in a technology and media-infused environment, marked by various characteristics including access to an abundance of information, rapid changes in technology tools, and the ability to collaborate and make individual contributions on an unprecedented scale. To be effective in the 21st century, citizens and workers must be able to exhibit a range of functional and critical thinking skills related to information, media, and technology. Finally, 21st century standards, assessments, curriculum, instruction, professional development, and learning environments must be aligned to produce and support a system that produces 21st century outcomes for today's students. Next, students need these specific skills to fully participate in today's global community: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. Communication. Learners must be able to share their thoughts, questions, ideas, and solutions across multiple media. Collaboration. Learners must be able to work together to reach a goal while putting their talent, expertise, and knowledge into use. Critical thinking. Learners must be able to look at problems in new ways and connect learning across content areas and situations. Finally, creativity. Learners must try new approaches to get things done. This leads to innovation, iteration, and invention. Bloom was an educational psychologist who led the effort in developing a taxonomy that served as a framework for classifying learning objectives, what we expect students to learn as a result of instruction. The taxonomy was updated and revised in 2002. Its various levels, remember, is retrieving relevant knowledge from long-term memory, usually recognizing, recalling skills such as that. Next is understanding, determining the meaning of instructional messages, including oral, written, and graphic communication, such as interpreting, exemplifying, classifying, summarizing, etc. Next, as we ascend the taxonomy, we go to apply, which is carrying out or using a procedure in a given situation. For example, executing or implementing. Next is analyze, breaking materials into its constituent parts and detecting how the parts relate to one another, to an overall structure or purpose, for instance, organizing, attributing, or differentiating. Next is evaluate, making judgments based on criteria and standards, for instance, checking and critiquing. Finally is create, putting elements together to form a novel, coherent whole, or make an original product. Many learning theorists' influences are accessed in current digital age teaching, learning, and assessment practices. Here's a small sample of relevant theorists and their philosophies. John Dewey proposed humans learn through a hands-on approach, proposed that humans learn through practical application, emphasized students or child-centered learning, combined instructional subjects in an interdisciplinary manner, and promoted learning with others. Montessori focused on students learning through sensory experience, also advocated for hands-on learning, believed in cultivating the whole learner in a holistic fashion, focused on developing skills. Piaget established a theory of cognitive development, theorized that humans gradually come to acquire, construct, and use knowledge, believed people use their prior knowledge and experiences to construct new knowledge, also called constructivism. Paulo Freire proposed critical pedagogy, empowered learners and teachers to question systemic oppression in learning, promoted empowerment so learners could become critically conscious, in-depth understanding of the world in order to improve it. Seymour Papert strived to produce and advocate for coercion-free learning environments. He launched the Maker Movement. Integrating digital tools into learning must be purposeful, promote new learning, and offer a relative advantage over another tool or strategy. Digital tools should provide learners with the agency to acquire new knowledge through a valuable experience. Technology, pedagogy, and content knowledge are intertwined and must be considered when integrating digital tools into instruction. Proper adoption of technology can enhance or transform learning. The cognitive demand for the task learners must do during the learning process may differ. Consult the depth of knowledge in Bloom's taxonomy. Technology integration is cyclical. Technology should help learners cultivate next-generation skills, like in the 4 C's. And numerous theorists have interjected their philosophies of learning, and it has shaped how technology tools are used today for learning. In this section, we'll explore the topic standards, the Common Core, and beyond.
Many nations have put into place comprehensive academic performance standards to be attained by all students. Initiatives such as the United States Common Core State Standards, Australia's Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority, and New Zealand's National State Standards identify a series of high-quality academic standards for mathematics and English language arts, as well as other subject areas. The standards were created in an attempt to ensure that all students graduate from high school with the skills and knowledge necessary to be college and career ready. Standards are the destination. However, the road to achieving the standards has not been built for educators brick by brick. While the standards dictate what must be taught, they do not prescribe how it must be taught. Richard Saul Wurman once commented that learning can be seen as the acquisition of knowledge, but before learning can take place, there must be of interest. That interest precedes learning. In order to acquire and remember new knowledge, it must stimulate curiosity in some way. Wurman went on to say that learning is like Velcro. Only one side of learning is made up of facts. The other consists of stories, ideas, experiences, and personal interest. Wurman says, presenting content to students without personal interest or relevance is like having only one side of a piece of Velcro. The content just doesn't stick. When adopting standards such as the Common Core, and while keeping in mind the need for 21st century learners, teachers can exercise their creativity to deliver instruction in dynamic and engaging ways. As our good friend Douglas Reeves states, the most powerful educational strategies and approaches are not those that merely keep up with the latest version of standards, but those that transcend every version of standards. If we had no standards and no national, provincial, or state mandates, the question would be, what is the right thing to do for students in the 21st century? We want our students to pursue digital fluency, critical thinking, and creativity, not because it is required by law, but because it's absolutely essential for the future world in which our students will live. If educators are to be successful and make learning relevant to the lives of the digital generations, then they can no longer only be content dispensers. The secret to success in any classroom has very little to do with being a good content dispenser or a classroom manager, and everything to do with creating an engaging methodology that compels students to want to be there. It is not about making students learn, it's about getting them to want to learn. Without motivation, there will be no learning. According to the high school survey of student engagement, 42% of respondents said they thought of dropping out because they didn't see the value in the work that they were asked to do. The reality is that the goals of schools are increasingly misaligned with the demands of the global marketplace. The new basics are the skills above and beyond being able to do well on a written exam that all students must cultivate to prepare themselves for success in the world that awaits them once they leave school. The new basics are made up of what our friend and colleague Ted McCain calls the 9 I's: intrapersonal skills, interpersonal skills, independent problem-solving skills, interdependent collaboration skills, information investigation skills, information communication skills, imagination creativity skills, innovation creativity skills, and internet citizenship skills. So in fact, we can have it all. We can simultaneously address both short-term learning goals and long-term life and career goals. We can have success on today's mandated exams while also helping our students develop the skills they need for tomorrow. Some strategies that help educators promote the 9 I's in modern learning include tapping into student interest and relevance, making real-world connections, showing students how to ask good questions, showing students how to reflect on their learning, encourage risk-taking, and promoting collaborative practice for both teachers and students. Students learn more effectively when they already know something about a content area and when concepts in that area have meaning to them and their background or culture. When teachers link new information to a student's prior knowledge, they activate interest and curiosity, infuse instruction with a sense of purpose. If our job as educators is to prepare students for the real world, why not start by having students solve real-world problems or perform real-world tasks? By making real-world connections to otherwise uninteresting or abstract concepts dictated by the curriculum, students can make meaning of content they are introduced to. If we want students to operate at the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy, we must ensure that they are able to see the relationship between concepts taught in class and current real-world contexts. If we want to fulfill our obligation for teaching the new basics, we must begin by showing our students how to ask good questions. Students will ask questions about things they are interested in or curious about. Being able to ask good questions helps with student engagement and interest, develops student thinking skills, stimulates students to inquire and investigate independently, helps them synthesize information and experiences, creates a context for exploring new ideas, and enhances students' cumulative knowledge base. Reflection, sometimes also referred to as debriefing, is the bridge between experiences and learning. We usually refer to this as metacognition, thinking about thinking. Reflection is an essential new basic for students. Once they are able to think about their thinking, they can learn how to learn. If we are going to adequately prepare students for the world ahead, we need to move beyond just quantitative summative assessment of learning. We have to move to qualitative formative assessment, to peer assessment, to self-assessment, and to community assessment. It's critical that we get our students involved at every stage of the evaluation process of their work, because group assessment, peer assessment, and self-assessment fosters personal ownership and accountability of the learning. Failure forces the person to think critically of his or her mistakes and avoid making them in the future by reflecting on their solutions. If failure was considered the end of the line, Thomas Edison would never have invented the light bulb. J.K. Rowling would have never published The Adventures of Harry Potter at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and no one would have heard of Michael Jordan, a high school student cut from his basketball team. In essence, failure forges great people, the type of people we need in an age of disruptive change and fundamental uncertainty. Teachers can't operate in silos of isolation. Successful lessons and teaching strategies must be prepared in the school building as well as global professional learning communities. Teachers have flocked to Twitter and Pinterest to explore and share success stories. Despite factors such as high-stakes testing, lack of financial resources, and foreign competition, the teaching profession remains one of the best industries for sharing trade secrets because the payoff equals a prosperous future for students. Teachers must actively seek out professional learning communities to learn from, share with, and network in. Use groups of like-minded educators to work through ideas and to find inspiration.
The next topic is what's wrong with kids today?
What's wrong with kids today? Kids just aren't as smart as they were when I was young. Students today can't read and write the way students did 20 years ago. Kids today don't have any social skills. All these kids want to do is play with their cell phones and video games. When I ask students for the capital city of Peru, they say they don't know. They want to Google it. What's Google got to do with learning anyway? Kids today just can't concentrate the way that we used to. Children can't or won't sit and listen. These are just a few of the many responses we've heard when talking to adults about the digital generations. Many teachers express great concern about their students' lack of ability to learn the way students did in the past. Many of the traditional teaching methods are just not as effective with students in classrooms today as they once were. Concerns have been expressed about the increasing amount of time the digital generations engage with their tools. There are those who even suggest that these tools are dumbing down our students and diminishing their ability to think for themselves. While we acknowledge that there are concerns, adults must realize that the children of the digital age use these tools in a manner that goes well beyond the ways we used traditional tools like paper, pencils, or a chalkboard. The challenge we face is understanding how these tools can be leveraged in a manner that interests and engages the digital learners. Neuroscientists Small and Vargon begin their book, iBrain, Surviving the Technological Alteration of the Modern Mind, with the following statement. Daily exposure to high technology, computers, smartphones, video games, search engines like Google and Yahoo, stimulates brain cell alteration and neurotransmitter release, gradually strengthening new neural pathways in our brains while weakening old ones. Because of the current technological revolution, our brains are all evolving right now at a speed like never before. The increasing amount of time that kids spend using their digital tools is having negative effects on several areas of their development. There is great concern that young people are not getting enough physical exercise. Coupled with the lack of physical activity, there is legitimate concern that they are not gaining an appreciation for nature and being in the outdoors. Many parents and teachers worry that young people are not spending enough time reading for pleasure, or reading at all for that matter. There are concerns that the highly addictive nature of computer games and online adventure sites and the interactive nature of most digital activities are creating such obsessive behavior in kids that it meets the definition of a clinical addiction. However, we must remember that balance goes both ways. Adults, parents, teachers, administrators, school district staff, community members, and politicians are all involved in making decisions about what students will learn, how they will learn, where they will learn, what programs will be offered, what equipment will be used, and how student performance will be evaluated. In the same way that we have every right to expect the digital generations to respect, understand, and engage with our world and our values, we must also take the time and effort to respect, understand, and engage with their world and their values. Just because the older generations were here first doesn't mean they and we can ignore the world of the digital generations. How can we expect students to see the relevance of instructional approaches that target outdated skills taught in an outdated manner? How can we hope to connect with the digital generations when the examples we use in our learning materials and our instruction come from a non-digital time they have never experienced and thus can't relate to? How can we think we are adequately preparing students for life in the 21st century if we ourselves have not learned how the 21st century world really operates? And how can we expect our students to follow our advice about how they should conduct themselves in the modern world when we ourselves have not engaged with their world in any meaningful way? There is an urgent need for balance in the lives of young people today. The digital generations must learn to engage effectively with both online and offline worlds. But in the same way that the digital generations need to find balance between their world and ours, there is also a desperate need for balance in the lives of those adults who are presently making critical decisions that will affect the lives and futures of the digital generations. As students, teacher interns, teachers, and perhaps administrators, we've all spent a minimum of 17 years inside the traditional classroom, inside what we call the Educentric Box. This applies to even our youngest teachers. Because of our experiences inside the Educentric Box, many of us have had very little opportunity, very little need to understand what's going on outside of education, where there are things happening that hold enormous implications for students and for those of us who work inside education. And because we've spent such a large portion of our lives inside the Educentric Box, it's absolutely certain that we are suffer from a terrible affliction. It's called terminal paradigm paralysis. What's a paradigm? A paradigm is a mindset, a perspective, a worldview, a way of looking for meaning in the world. Most people only see as far as their own experiences. A paradigm is incredibly powerful because it can prevent us from seeing things from other points of view. Our paradigm is often the reason for doing something we can no longer think of a reason for doing. Our paradigms are an everyday, unconscious, taken for granted part of our lives. And our educational paradigms can compel us to do things in the same way that have traditionally been done. Despite the fact the world might have changed just a little bit in the meantime, there's nothing worse than getting caught with your paradigm down.
The next topic is kids are different.
The digital landscape is a collection or system of man or artificial intelligence created spaces in the digital world. Website images, videos, databases, social media content, and raw data are just some of the types of content present in these spaces. The digital landscape is a very busy place. The sheer numbers are staggering. Every minute of the day, YouTube users upload 100 hours of new video. Email users send 204 million messages. Google receives over 4 million search queries. Facebook's users share over 2 million pieces of content. Tinder users swipe
416,000 times. WhatsApp users share 347,000 photos. Twitter users tweet 277,000 comments. Instagram users post 16,000 new photos. Amazon makes $83,000 in online sales. Pandora users listen to 61,000 video or hours of music. Apple users download 48,000 apps. Yelp users post 26,000 reviews. Skype users connect for 23,000 hours of video calls. Vine users share 8,000 videos. And Pinterest users pin 3,472 images. There are many excellent sources for statistics out there, but some really good ones include the New York Times, Intel, Apple, Time, Daily Mail, Skype, and Statistic Brain. The book, Understanding the Digital Generation, suggests that as parents, citizens, and particularly as educators, what we need to do is acknowledge that the world has fundamentally changed and continues to change. As a result, we also need to understand that while on the outside kids today pretty much look the same as we did when we were growing up, this belies the fact that on the inside, neurologically, today's digital generations are completely different than previous generations. What we now understand is that because of digital bombardment, because of the digital generation's pervasive exposure to digital technology, exposure that primarily happens outside of school hours, that digital bombardment is literally wiring and rewiring kids' brains on an ongoing basis. And in particular, it's enhancing their visual memory, their visual processing, and their visual learning skills. This is happening regardless of race, regardless of culture, regardless of socioeconomics, and regardless of geography. Love it or hate it, screen culture is a foundational element of contemporary childhood. The digital generations live a three-screen lifestyle. This includes any combination of TV, computer, tablet, or cell phone. And they're using these different devices to build very complex and deep modes of communications with one another. This is the always-on generation. They spend 80 hours a week using 1, 2, or 3 more screens simultaneously, as opposed to about 25 hours a week they spend attending school. In other words, they spend more than 3 times the amount of time they spend at school looking at their screens. They've moved from being teenagers to being screenagers. Of that 80 plus hours of screen time, they spend more than 30 hours a week online, and this number has grown by 25% in the last year. And it's women, not men, who are the power users. Women in America use the internet 17% more every month than their male counterparts. Women are more likely to be using their mobile phones. They spend more time talking and texting with them. They are the largest population of users of Skype. They are the fastest growing category and biggest users of every social networking site, with the exception of LinkedIn. They are also sending an astounding 4,050 texts per month. That's more than 135 texts per day, or 8 texts for every waking hour. And these numbers have also increased by 25% in the past year. New technologies are all about talking to one another, cooperation, and being part of a group. And women excel at this kind of inclusivity. Shifting the focus slightly to another trend, the digital generations play almost 230 hours of video games a month, or 10,000 hours of gaming by the time they're 21 years of age. To put this into perspective, 10,000 hours of gaming is about 24 hours less than students spend in a classroom for all of intermediate and high school if they have perfect attendance. And in case you think gaming is just a guy thing, it's not. The fastest growing sector of the mobile gaming market is women. Women between the ages of 8 and 25 using smartphones or tablets. Increasingly, women are hooked on gaming too. Let's switch to video. Let's talk about YouTube. Every 60 seconds, 24 hours a day, more than 500,000 videos are being viewed on YouTube. That's almost 5 billion YouTube views a day, or almost 2 trillion playbacks last year. 2 trillion playbacks is roughly 170 video views for every man, woman, and child on the planet. The amount of video being uploaded to YouTube is almost beyond imagination. Every minute, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, 100 hours of new video are uploaded. more than 4 days worth of video every minute, 24/7. Think about it, every minute you're another 4 days behind. Now consider that 100 hours a minute is more than 8,700 years of content uploaded every year. Let's talk Facebook. There are more than 7 billion visits to Facebook daily. Every 60 seconds on Facebook's users, they send 230,000 messages, update 95,000 statuses, write 80,000 wall posts, upload 35,000 photos, share 50,000 links, and make 500,000 comments. 74% of teens reach for their phone the moment they wake up. 25% log into social media 10 or more times a day. They use these devices to connect to their culture. Their use is not optional for kids today. They see the world as one great big social network. They are used to immediate feedback from video games and online experiences. It's clear that many young and old people alike are completely consumed by Facebook. And keep in mind that all the numbers I've just cited are already out of date by the time you view this. Why are the digital generation spending so much time with their digital technology? And why is the amount of time spent using these technologies increasing so quickly? There are many reasons why this is happening. The internet is a telephone, television, game console, and radio seamlessly wrapped up into one device. Teens go online to chat with their friends, kill boredom, experience the wider world, and follow the latest trends. They use their devices to meet, play, date, and learn. It's an integral part of their social life. It's how they acknowledge each other and form their personal identities. For many of the digital generations, exposure to this new digital landscape may be the first experience in their lives with empowerment. Digital technologies enable them to be heard, recognized, and taken seriously. Social media such as Twitter and Facebook are not just about casual commentary, online socializing, or passive consumption of digital information. Social media encourages interaction in and with the digital world, providing both individuals and groups with a soapbox from which to express personal and collective perspectives, opinions, and contributions about every imaginable topic. Digital culture is the new normal, not just locally, regionally, or nationally, but worldwide. And this new world of digital immersion has affected virtually every aspect of our lives, from our thought processes and work habits to our capacity for linear thinking to how we feel about ourselves, our friends, and even distant strangers. And this has all happened virtually overnight. The critical takeaway from this is that if you haven't adopted social media in a significant way, you run the risk of shutting out the most powerful communication channels ever known. And this is just the beginning. We're still very early on in the social networking revolution. As parents, citizens, and particularly educators, we have no choice but to engage with the new digital reality and work to ensure that it affects our children in healthy and responsible ways.